Welcome to The Wing, the emotional and financial health check you never knew you needed. We provide tangible solutions for young women to build emotional health and wealth on their journey from school to motherhood. This is the podcast for young women in Australia navigating the big stuff: life, money, and motherhood. From high school to first homes, babies to bank accounts, we take you on an interactive listening journey that helps you make smart, empowered decisions every step of the way.
Hello, ladies, and welcome to another episode of The Wing. Today, we're going to be talking about money blueprints, which I have lightly touched on in previous episodes, but I'm using a book today, and I'm referencing the author Harv Eker, and the name of the book is Secrets of the Millionaire Mind: Think Rich to Get Rich. Now, that probably sounds pretty crass or bold, and it's not about, getting rich, but what we're going to pull out of this book, possibly to save you needing to read the whole thing, but I do highly recommend reading the whole thing because there's certainly some great takeaways in this book that have been very clearly thought out, and some methodologies that I know that you would get some benefit out of. But what I'm going to try and do here is pull out the key parts that might help you understand your money blueprint a little bit more and work out, if you need to, how to change it. It'll also be relevant for how you look at a money blueprint in terms of your children. So learning what your money blueprint is and your partners, perhaps communicating that with one another to then figure out where you're at now, where you want to be, and how your money blueprints are going to impact the money blueprint of your children. So let's get into it. So just to frame this firstly, so it sort of talks about going into having outer laws of money and inner laws. So the outer laws include things like business knowledge, money management, and investment strategies. But the inner game is just as important. So who are you? How do you think? What are your beliefs? What are your habits and traits? How do you really feel about yourself? How confident are you in yourself? How well do you relate to others, and how much do you trust others? Do you truly feel that you deserve wealth? What is your ability to act in spite of fear, in spite of worry, in spite of inconvenience, in spite of discomfort? Can you act when you're not in the mood? That's a great question, particularly for us ladies, because if we've got little kids running around, like what happened to me this morning. Today, I'm actually in the beginning of one of my 24 hours off for the month. And my plan this morning was to get up slowly, have a cup of tea, and sit it on the bedside table next to me, so that, because I can't do that because I have two toddlers, they come up and they whack that hot tea everywhere, all over the carpet. So I just wanted that little luxury this morning. And then Jake, bless him, had organised for a tradesman to come to the house and organise some doors to be hung for us. So obviously there was a lot of drilling going on downstairs. I did come down and say good morning to everyone, and I swiftly fluttered off back into my time off. And I was thinking, right, I can't wait to record some podcasts today because I really feel like this keeps me up at night, thinking about topics and thinking about what I'm going to talk about next, like in an exciting way. So I thought, right, I've got a clear runway for this morning. I'm going to do that. And we went back to our room, start sort of reading about what I'm going to talk about. Anyway, Jake came up to have a shower, kids came in, had to move my tea. I had to sort of juggle my book in one hand and my phone in the other hand. I wasn't recording, but I was getting ready to. And then all of a sudden I'm thinking, am I in the mood? Like, has my mood been robbed? Am I even in the mood anymore? All I want to do is talk about money blueprints today. And now I feel like I'm not in the mood. So maybe I'm a live example of, can I act when I'm not in the mood? I am actually in the mood. So don't worry. We got over it. Jake and kids are out. We've got some quiet time, ladies. So, we're going to get into it, and hopefully I'm going to pass on some knowledge to you today. But I'm sure any mums out there can relate, and particularly to that question: can you act when you're not in the mood? Particularly when it comes to money. Like, that's obviously a fun example for me. But, acting on making money decisions or choices, or focusing on a next investment, or working out what your next investment might actually be, or having a meeting with an accountant, or doing research on a financial planner, like, is that the thing that we feel like doing at the end of the day? Probably not. But hopefully this will shift some of your thinking and make you understand why it is important to act when you're not in the mood, and really dig into the questions that I asked earlier to help you establish what your success might look like and how to raise your own energy and how to essentially grow your income to the extent that you want to. So, why is your money blueprint important? So, you might, to sort of frame what a money blueprint is, so you might have heard of people like blowing up financially, or people that have had a lot of money and then they've lost it, or people that have had really good opportunities that start really well, but then they go sour on them. Now, on the outside, some of these situations might look like bad luck or a downturn in the economy or partnership breakdown or whatever the case may be. But on the inside, there is another reason for this. So it all comes back to our money blueprint. But there's an example here of how, you might see somebody win the lottery as an example. So regardless on the size of somebody's winnings in a lottery, that person likely didn't necessarily come from wealth in the first place or didn't have a wealth, more a growth mindset, but they got lucky and they won all this money in the lottery. But what that person might end up doing is just defaulting back to their spendings of the amount of money that they are comfortable handling, and that would be because of their money blueprint and because of how they live their lives and how they manage their money in that instance. So we're going to kind of get into that mindset and what that actually looks like. So with your money blueprint, now, as I'm sure you could probably guess, yes, it does come from your parents or your primary caregivers. So again, parents, this is why it's important to learn this about yourself so that you can instill or at least lay out a suitable money blueprint that is sufficient and long term for your children. So there's a little saying in here, the roots create the fruits. So instead of obviously there's a clear analogy here, I'm sure it kind of makes a lot of sense. But if you want to change the fruits, you will first have to change the roots. If you want to change the visible, you must first change the invisible. So a money blueprint is invisible. It is if you think of a house plan, that's the blueprint to a house that isn't built yet. So that blueprint has been drawn up by somebody else. Because that plan is there, that's the plan you're going to follow. And then ultimately you build the house, and then that house sits on that blueprint or sits on that foundation, and it is what it is. There's not much you can do to change it. The beauty of a money blueprint is that you can change it. Now, roots creating the fruit. So you can have this beautiful fruit tree in the backyard, but it might only spit out a couple of cherries once a year, and you're sitting there questioning, why isn't my cherry tree growing these cherries? Like, what can I, oh, it just must be a dud fruit tree. Like, instead of focusing on that fruit, you're better off going to the roots of your cherry tree and figuring out what's in the soil, what's next to the cherry tree. Is the cherry tree in a nice position for the sun and rain and different things that a cherry tree needs? I don't know what a cherry tree needs, but it's just an example. Rather than looking at your bank account or your saving strategy or the monetary things that you can actually see or the house you live in or the job that you have, it is worthwhile going a deeper level and working out, how do you actually think about money? How do you position that thinking in your day to day? How do you use that thinking to make decisions? You might have heard of something called a scarcity mindset or an abundance mindset. So that comes into your money blueprint, and it would be all to do with how your parents handled money or your primary caregivers, how they handled money, and then what impact that had on you growing up. And that is typically how you will be handling money. So if you find that, your parents, maybe they were really frugal and they didn't want to spend a lot of money, or maybe they were quite free with their money and maybe they were happy to spend money on all sorts of things, or maybe they were somewhere in between and they were frugal on the things that they didn't think were necessary to spend money on. Maybe it's an extra pair of shoes or an extra cap that matches the one you already got for Christmas, but then they would spend money on tuition and a working car and things like that. So whatever those success habits were, or those habits with money were for your parents, is something that you can look at and draw on and start to figure out what that money blueprint is for you. An example of one for me, and this was funny because this has come up recently, it comes up all the time. So I'll go and do our weekly shop online and spend, between, I guess, call it 250. We'll call it 250. So spending $250 on a weekly shop, and then I'll scrounge around on the Coles website or on the Coles app to find a delivery time, firstly, that works in with our routine. So I try not to get the groceries delivered while the kids are sort of at their, at a dodgy time of day when I know I'm going to be needing to manage them. But also try and find a time slot that's either, if I haven't hit over that free delivery threshold, that I want the $2 delivery. I don't want to pay $8 or $11 for the delivery. I want the cheapest one. So recently what I did was I did our weekly shop and I picked the delivery time slot between 3 p.m. and 9 p.m., which I thought was pretty, surely they're going to deliver it earlier. No one wants to be working at Coles till 9 o'clock at night. Anyway, so that delivery cost me $2. And Jake said to me, he said, can we please just in future, just because we were both exhausted, we were in bed waiting for the groceries to arrive. And of course, they took all the way to the 9 o'clock that night. And he said, can we please just in future, like, spend that extra little bit of money for the convenience? Like, it's between $2 and $4 to $6 difference. You're going to get the time cost versus, like, why am I like this? Why am I picking the $2 delivery slot and waiting up till 9 o'clock at night to have groceries delivered when it's a very simple, I use the online delivery service so that it's convenient. And for me, I outdid my own convenience with my inconvenience. So that goes back to my money blueprint. So that is something where I'm thinking, okay, well, I've spent the money, but I need to save it somewhere else. So I've spent the money, even though it's weekly groceries and it's things that we actually need, and a lot of it was kids' food. But I then have this weird mindset that pulls me back and goes, don't spend too much. No, that's enough. Like, you just do the $2 slot. Doesn't matter if it's inconvenient, just do that one. There's a million examples that I could think of that are like that, where, even to do with travel. Like, for example, my dad, when he travels, he will never do checked luggage ever. It's a time thing, I think. Maybe also if the luggage gets lost, but also just so he can maximize his time on holiday and not be running around looking for his luggage. So we'll always just take a backpack. For me, I found that really confusing because I thought, well, most flights, it doesn't really cost extra to have checked luggage. It's just like sort of part of your ticket, so you may as well just use it anyway. But the mindset around that and like shoving all these things for a week in a tiny backpack, like, what is that about? But it's that scarcity, that sort of like, you don't need more than you need, just only use what you need. And I can see that mindset has definitely transferred onto me, because I try not to overspend, and it doesn't feel good to me if that happens, but it's all part of my money blueprint. And there are some things in my money blueprint that I've noticed that I think, right, that needs to change. But how do I do that? I have to get to the blueprint. I can't just change a habit on the surface. I can't just think that the fruit isn't that good and we'll try again next season. No, I have to dig into the roots, and I need to figure out, why am I trying to save $2 on Coles delivery? We need to be better. Let's try and figure that out. So money is a result, wealth is a result, health is a result, illness is a result, your weight is a result, and we live in a world of cause and effect. So again, thinking about cause and effect, thinking about, okay, well, if I spend this on this, then what is the effect going to be? What is going to be that outcome, and how do I deal with that? Probably a live example of cause and effect is what I've noticed is some conversations that I've had recently with people that I know. So I've got contacts that are right into superannuation, right into making sure that their super is at the highest level that it possibly can be now, that, when they're able to access that super, it's going to be at a healthy amount. I've got other contacts that don't care about super at all and think, well, if I'm not making as high super contributions, then does it really matter? I'm living a better quality of life right now, so why do I need to worry about it later when I don't even know what later looks like? I've got other contacts that have different structures set up, like SMSFs, so self-managed super funds, which are different to your standard industry super fund. So self-managed super fund means that you manage it. Well, you don't. You have a financial professional that does it, but you are empowered to make decisions with that money so that you can build, or that you can accelerate your wealth building. But there's things within SMSF which we will speak with an SMSF professional at some stage, but there's a minimum limit that you need to have in your super in order to set an SMSF up. There's annual fees that go along with having one of those. But there's other benefits, like you can build your super potentially faster over time, and then you have more of a chance of passing on your generational wealth to your kids because it's set up in a structure that's transferable. So there's pros and cons to all of it, but it's a case of, what's that cause and effect? Like, if I'm putting in money for super now, what's that going to look like later? And it's really hard to visualize what that looks like later. So a lot of people just default to the industry standard or whatever your workplace is doing. Okay, we'll just take a percentage of my pay and I won't see it and I won't know about it, and it'll just go into my industry super fund and grow until I need it, and then I'll need it, and then hopefully won't end up on may end up on the pension, may not. 64% of Australians will end up on the pension. That is a stat that I know to be true. What does that actually look like? Whereas with an SMSF, you could be setting it up in such a way where it's actually, you're accruing this money over time. So then you get to a stage where you can access your super, and your super is actually paying you an income that could be worth more than what your salary ever was, and you also have a cash balance. So there's pros and cons to different things, but it all comes back to how you think about it. So if you're thinking long term and you're thinking, no, that's really important to me and I need to, that's the result that I want, then you're going to be putting maximum amount of super away, or exploring different structures, or looking at different asset classes to invest in. That's your mindset. Or you're not going to worry about that much at all, and it just sort of ticks along and does whatever it does. Or you're not going to contribute at all, or you're going to make limited contributions because you want to be living in the moment and doing what you're doing right now. Same goes with debt and lending. So I've, again, got contacts that you are loaded up with debt, and they might be asset rich and cash poor, and that's their strategy because they know that over time those assets will eventually be paid off and generate an income. So it's, loading up in your 20s or your 30s or even your 40s to have that access to financial freedom later on. That's a strategy to accessing financial freedom later in life. Or I've got contacts that are very debt or risk adverse and don't want to have a mortgage hanging over their heads, or don't want to have an investment property they have to manage, even though that is not always the case. That's another mindset, and that's another money blueprint of no, like the more you have, the more money, more problems, the more things you've got to worry about, like, the more things that can go wrong. So, there's that mindset as well. But all of this is a result. So, and that's being a wealth principle that I'm pulling out of this book as well, that everything is a result. So it depends how you think about it. It depends how what you want your future to look like, and what professionals you have in your network that are able to give you the right information so that you can make a decision on what you actually want that to look like, rather than just being put in a box and told you must earn this amount of money in order to earn this amount of super, and this is what your life is going to look like. Well, if that's not for you, then you can work out ways around that and how to generate wealth sooner and create that financial freedom sooner. It's funny, the title of this book is, as I said, Secrets of the Millionaire Mind. Think rich to get rich. But rich, I think, is a bit of a redundant word, because to me, through my perspective, what is rich? For me, rich is having a happy household. Rich is having a full tank of petrol. Rich is having the kettle boiled. There's lots of different things for me that I have thought about over time that I think there's other things that make me feel rich, that, my 24 hours off. I'm loaded right now. Look at me. I'm by myself in my house. That never happens. Those things are, to me, rich. But obviously in this book they're talking about money rich. But what even is rich? Like, is it a dollar figure? Is it, I want to have $500,000 in my bank account and then I'll be rich? Or I want to earn 200 grand a year and then I'll be rich. Or I want to have a business that generates, $5 million a year in total revenue. Then I'll be rich. Or my net worth will be $10 million. Then I'll be rich. Like, what is rich? As I said, I think it's a bit of a redundant word. And I think what we should be searching for, young women and young families, is we should be searching for financial freedom. So again, back to your money blueprint. Your money blueprint probably tells you, if you're in the generation that I hope to be speaking to through this podcast is that you're rich, middle class, or poor. And, redundant terms. I think that, where you're at in your journey should be about how you're looking in the future to create financial freedom. And what does financial freedom look like for you? So, does financial freedom look like being able to take a year off work, put your kids in your caravan, and travel around Australia and see a whole bunch of different things? But you don't need to work that whole 12 months. You and your partner, or you and whoever, don't need to work, and that's an experience you're going to give your kids. Is that your idea of financial freedom? Is it that you want to go to Europe once a year, every year, for a family holiday? What does that financial freedom actually look like? Does it mean, for me, one of my things of financial freedom, and again, I'm working on debunking my money blueprint, ordering my weekly grocery shop without worrying how much it costs, all the delivery fees, or ordering so much that you get free delivery, which does happen occasionally. That financial freedom, that essence of feeling you're not bound by your money. You don't feel like you have to work. You don't have to work, because in fact you have the money that you need to facilitate the lifestyle that you want. And until you're able to recognize what your money blueprint is, you will be able to work out how to figure out your financial freedom. All right, so a little bit more about your financial blueprint. It consists of a combination of your thoughts, feelings, and actions in the arena of money. So, how is it formed? The answer is simple. The financial blueprint consists primarily of the information or programming you received in the past, and especially as a young child. Who were the primary sources of this programming or conditioning? For most people, the list includes parents, siblings, friends, authority figures, teachers, religious leaders, media, your culture, and that's just to name a few. So there's lots of different people in your life that can impact your money blueprint or the programming around how you view money. So your programming that you've experienced growing up leads to your thoughts lead to feelings, and your feelings lead to your actions, and your actions are what leads to your results. So this is why going back all the way to the start is so critical, so that you can understand where you're actually going or how to change and navigate along the way. It also comes down to how we are conditioned. So we're conditioned in three primary ways in every arena of life, including money. So verbal programming. What did you hear when you were young? Modeling. What did you see when you were young? Or specific incidents. What did you experience when you were young? These three aspects of conditioning are important to understand, so that we can figure out which of those styles of programming have had the biggest impact on you. So the first influence is verbal programming. So what did you hear about money? What did you hear about wealth? What did you hear about rich people when you were growing up? So if in your household you might have asked something of your parents, and the answer might have been, well, what am I? Am I made of money? Comments like that. Or what you might have heard, like, about rich people, for example. And again, rich people. Ugh. Rich people are greedy, or oh, they just blow all their money, or things like that. And then that making you not want to be in that arena, because you don't want to disappoint whoever you heard that from, or you try and fit into what the blueprint that's ultimately being created for you from a very young age. You're picking up on all these things that you're being verbally programmed to hear and pick up on, so that they ultimately have an impact on you longer term. So you may not realize it at the time, but these little things, or don't spend money on that, or that's a waste of money, or whatever those comments are, they all contribute to how you think about money now. So perhaps that's an exercise to go through. Maybe you could write down some of the things that you remember hearing growing up that made you think about how you now think about money. And then that will help you identify, okay, right, so this is how I think about, right, this is why I don't like spending money on holidays, or this is why I'll get the $2 delivery slot from Coles online delivery. Map out what is that verbal modeling, because what these three modeling pieces are, then you're going to figure them out for yourself, but then you're going to flip it on its head, and you're going to figure out, okay, well, how are we going to talk about money in front of our kids? Or what are the principles about money that we're going to teach them, so that they have a secure money blueprint growing up, And that will feed into your belief system around money. Is it working really hard and setting yourselves up for the future? Is it enjoying what you're doing right now and not worrying as much about the future? Is it passing on generational wealth to your kids? I'll share with you actually to give you a prompt on how maybe you could think about this as well. But something that Jake and I have discussed is that obviously we want our kids to learn the value of money, which I think a lot of parents could agree with and understand and think, yes, that I agree with that. But we want them to understand the value of money. So when the tooth fairy comes, they're not getting $15 a tooth. I don't know. I don't know what the going rate is these days. I'll have to ask one of my mum friends who has kids that are of that age. But, keeping it within a reasonable boundary so it's not just handed out, or pocket money for chores, things like that are hopefully going to help them learn the value of money. Having a job, or when they're teenagers, or doing something like that, is sort of understanding those transactions. But on the flip side is that Jake and I are doing absolutely everything we can to ensure that we're able to pass on generational wealth. That's a big focus for us. So we've gone down the road of having relevant structures and things set up for us in the financial space so that the generational wealth transfer is not straightforward, is probably not the right word, but is there for us to build up and accelerate during our working lives, so that it's not all for nothing and that it is something that's going to be tangible for our kids. Now, the bit that is, I think, the most important bit is we're not going to tell them that. We're not going to say, like I mentioned on an earlier podcast, that we want to have an investment property for every one of our kids. So we have 2 at the moment. We need to get 1 more, which we will do in the coming couple of years. But we're not going to tell them that. They're not going to know that those properties are for them. We're going to own those properties and have them accumulating wealth for us, and to have them ultimately making money and providing an income at some stage and helping us achieve financial freedom. But if our motivation is our kids, then that's a good motivation for us, but it's also going to benefit them at some stage down the track. That we can then leverage that. If one of them wants to go and get a house loan, then maybe we could leverage the equity from one of our investment properties for them to go and do that. But they won't know that until they go down that path, and we teach them all of the things that they need to do to buy a house, pretending that our investment property doesn't exist, because to them, our investment property probably won't exist. It won't be a driving factor from their perspective. They won't think, that's all right, we don't need to save anything, or we don't need to have a job or whatever, because we can just lean on mum and dad to do that for us. Like, what we're trying to do is 2-part. So Jake and I, on our own investment journey and our own wealth creation journey, set that up, know that that is going to be passed on to our kids in one way or another, or many ways or another, in the future at the right time. But then for the kids, teaching them about the value of money and making sure that they understand how that actually works and what they need to do to achieve their own financial freedom. But we know that we are going to be able to help them if we need to. We may not need to. And then, these are things that, are all going to transpire over the next 20 to 30 to 50, however many years. So now I digress. The second influence, modeling. So the second way we are conditioned is called modeling. What were your parents or guardians like in the arena of money when you were growing up? Did one or both of them manage their money well, or did they mismanage it? Were they spenders or savers? Were they shrewd investors, or were they non-investors? Were they risk takers or conservative? Was money consistently there, or was the flow more sporadic? Did money come easily in your family, or was it always a struggle? Was money a source of joy in your household, or a cause of bitter arguments? Now, why is this important? You've probably heard the saying, monkey see, monkey do. Well, humans aren't far behind. As kids, we learn just about everything from modeling. So almost most of us would hate to admit it, but there's more than a grain of truth in the old saying, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. So I did touch on this before with the things that I'd seen and heard, in my household growing up, that have clearly had an impact on how I view money and how I spend it or save it or whatever it is. But it really is, something that you're observing and what that modeling actually looks like for you. As an example, there's an example in this book, but I'll give you a real life example. So of how you mirror, or you want to mirror your parents, or you want to impress them, or you want to do things a certain way because that's the way they did it. I remember my mum doing the washing up, and she would leave soap suds on the sink. And I just thought, I was like, oh, that looks really clean. Like, that's the way to do it. So then I had a job at a cafe, and I was doing the washing up. And then I would leave, like, I'd wash everything up and everything would be put away and dried. But then I would just leave soap suds on the sink. And I remember my boss coming over to me one day, and she said, Katie, why do you do this? Like, why can't you wipe the soap suds away so the sink is like, there's no liquid on the sink or anything like that? And I was like, oh, that's what my mum does. And they were like, okay. So, like, what's that about? I don't know. I was just copying something that my mum did because I thought, oh, that's how she does it. That's the way to go. I'm going to do that too. So the same thing goes for your money blueprint. And the way you view that is because you're watching your parents operate it in a certain way, but it also might have an opposite effect. Like if your parents fought a lot about money and it was a point of contention in their relationship, then maybe that's something you consciously don't want to bring into your relationship. So you are clearer with communication with your partner, and you're making sure that you communicate well on that topic, and you aren't awful to one another. Like maybe there's that effect as well. If your motivation for acquiring money or success comes from a non-supportive route, such as fear, anger, or the need to prove yourself, your money will never bring you happiness. Now, it's great because this book has wealth principles all throughout it. So it's got some nice little reminders in here about, again, your money blueprint. What's your why? What is your why? How do you handle it? Now, the third influence is specific incidents. So the third primary way in which we are conditioned is by specific incidents. What did you experience when you were young around money, wealth, and rich people? These experiences are extremely important because they shape the beliefs, or rather the illusions, that you now live by. So in terms of steps for change around these principles, they're basically broken it down into 4 pieces that you can work on to start to help change your money blueprint, or at least help understand it. So that's awareness, understanding, disassociation, and declaration. So awareness, obviously, which you've spoken about as well, is just being aware. What is your money blueprint? How do you spend money? Do you have a scarcity mindset? Do you have an abundance mindset? Do are you frugal? Are you an avid investor? That awareness piece is going to be key. Understanding. So then digging into, okay, well, no, I have an abundance mindset. So what is that about? What does that mean? How can I channel that? How can I make sure that I carry that on to my kids, because I think it's a really positive thing. Disassociation. So if this is something that, like if you have a money blueprint that you're not happy with, that you think, oh, that reminds me of something my dad said, or oh, my mum used to do that, or I don't want to be like my parents, or if it's pulling that up for you, then the disassociation. So can you see this way of being is only what you learned and isn't you? Can you have a choice in the present moment to be different? That's the disassociation piece. And then the declaration. So stating what you're going to do and how you are going to be different, moving forward, and how you're going to be different from the traits or the blueprint elements that you don't like or you don't relate to, that you want to set up differently for your kids. There's a fun little part in this book as well. It talks about saving money for a rainy day. What for? Save it for a fun day. It goes back to thinking about money in the way of financial freedom. So, less so about the old school way of getting rich or winning lump sums of money or getting lucky and aiming for that. Rather, and I think our generation is probably quite open to this, but thinking about it in a different way, rather than, because we don't know unless you know what rich looks like for you in a dollar figure, then if that's the case, then go for it. But looking at it as a freedom piece. Are you going to be working 40 hours a week for the man forever? Maybe that's something you want to do because that's secure. Maybe that's where you get your joy. I don't know. Maybe it's, no, I need to go out on my own and start a business and have the freedom to work when I'm feeling productive and have no cap on my earning. Maybe that's it. What does that freedom piece actually look like for you? So, what is your money blueprint set for? So, answering the $1 million question, what is your current money and success blueprint, and what results is it subconsciously moving you toward? Are you set for success, mediocrity, or financial failure? Are you programmed for struggle or for ease around money? Are you set for working hard for your money or working in balance? Are you conditioned for having a consistent income or an inconsistent income? So you know the scoop. First you have it, then you don't. Then you have it, then you don't. It always appears as though the reasons for these drastic fluctuations come from the outside world. For instance, I got a great paying job, but then the company folded. Then I started my own business and things were booming, but the market dried up. My next business was doing super, but then my partner left, etc. Don't be fooled. This is your money blueprint at work. Wow, that sounded like me actually. So again, awareness piece, making sure that you know what your blueprint is, or at least traits of your blueprint, so that you can either disassociate and rebuild, or you can acknowledge and work with it depending how you feel about it right now. Now, you have the power to choose and think in ways that will support you in your happiness and success instead of ways that don't. As we know, you are the power of you. So there's nothing that you can identify that can't be solved. The number one reason why most people don't get what they want is they don't know what they want. So if you can debunk that, again, like what is rich? What is rich to you? Things that I actually wrote a list once in one of my journals. I wrote down things that make me feel rich. And I alluded to a couple of those before. So full tank of petrol, a full kettle. I think that's the abundance mindset coming out in me. All the ironing done, having the freedom to cook all afternoon, things like that, that are, they're not money rich. And that, I mean, petrol costs money, but that's not the reason of it. It's the freedom that that gives me. I've got a full tank of petrol. I can go anywhere at any time at the drop of a hat, and I do not have to stop at a service station. Well, I already did because the petrol tank is full, but writing down that list of things that made me feel rich, sitting in the sun for half an hour, having a hot bath, again, those things that make me feel rich, seeing the kids happy and well in the morning, that makes me feel loaded. Like I think, yes, or putting them to bed at night, that makes me feel rich too, because I think, oh, again, that structure, those things that are structured, they lead to freedom. So by putting the kids down at a set time at night to bed, I know that they're going to have a very restful night. I get to spend a few hours with Jake. And that structure has led us to freedom, but that makes me feel rich. So how do you feel rich in other ways that aren't just related to money? Now, either way, and depending on how you look at money and what your money blueprint is, but ultimately, I love this wealth principle. If you are not fully, totally, and truly committed to creating wealth, the chances are you won't. Now, wealth can be anything. You could feel you're most wealthy when you have a secure job. You've got that security, you have that safety, and that to you is wealth. Your wealth might be in your health. You might actually feel you're most wealthy when you are in a really good rhythm and you're eating well and you're exercising frequently and you're drinking enough water and you're taking all your vitamins and you're doing all these things. Like, if that is what wealth looks like to you, then that is something to be acknowledged, and that is actually part of your blueprint. If you're not truly committed to these things, if you're not truly in it and wanting to look at how you build that wealth, how you build that fulfillment, how you achieve that freedom, whether it be financial or with time or both, it is very individualized and very much up to you. Hopefully, I have given you some tools to teach you how to observe your ways of thinking and challenging your limiting, non supportive thoughts, habits, and actions with regard to money. And hopefully, you're able to conduct a little exercise for yourself on figuring out what your money blueprint is, what you want it to be, and how you want to transfer or how you want to establish a money blueprint for your children. The reason that we start talking about this in the light of money is that money is one of the biggest areas of pain in most people's lives, but there's a bigger picture to consider. So once you start recognizing your non-supportive ways around finances, this awareness will transfer into every other part of your life. Now, I would highly recommend giving this book a read if you are interested. So, The Secrets of the Millionaire Mind, Think Rich to Get Rich. But again, you don't need to do a cover to cover to understand on what the principles actually are. But hopefully this has given you some tools to improve your financial future and to help you build wealth and achieve financial freedom sooner. Thank you so much, ladies. I hope you enjoyed the episode. And if you have any specific questions about wealth building or financial freedom, please get in touch with me. As I've mentioned, I have a network of resources that are able to help you shift your money blueprint and improve your way of the future for yourself, your partner, and your family.
Enjoyed the episode? Hit follow and check out _wingpod Oz on Instagram for a dose of wisdom getting you on the right path to success.